I come before you today because the American people deserve to know that as we speak, Beijing is employing a whole-of-government approach, using political, economic, and military tools as well as propaganda to advance its influence and benefit its interests in the United States. China is also applying this power in more proactive ways than ever before to exert influence and interfere in the domestic policy and politics of this country. Under President Trump's leadership, the United States has taken decisive action to respond to China. The dream of freedom remains distant for the Chinese people. Now, through the Made in China 2025 plan, the Communist Party has set its sights on controlling 90% of the world's most advanced industries, including robotics, biotechnology, and artificial intelligence. To win the commanding heights of the 21st century economy, Beijing has directed its bureaucrats and businesses to obtain American intellectual property, the foundation of our economic leadership, by any means necessary. Beijing now requires many American businesses to hand over their trade secrets as the cost of doing business in China. It also coordinates and sponsors the acquisition of American firms to gain ownership of their creations. Worst of all, Chinese security agencies have masterminded the wholesale theft of American technology, including cutting-edge military blueprints. And using that stolen technology, the Chinese Communist Party is turning plowshares into swords on a massive scale. China now spends as much on its military as the rest of Asia combined. And Beijing has prioritized capabilities to erode America's military advantages on land, at sea, in the air, and in space. China wants nothing less than to push the United States of America from the Western Pacific and attempt to prevent us from coming to the aid of our allies. But they will fail. These ships routinely patrol around the Senkaku Islands, which are administered by Japan. Beijing has deployed advanced anti-ship and anti-air missiles atop an archipelago of military bases constructed on artificial islands. China's aggression was on display this week when a Chinese naval vessel came within 45 yards of the USS Decatur as it conducted freedom of navigation operations in the South China Sea, forcing our ship to quickly maneuver to avoid collision. Not be intimidated, and we will not stand down. What they call the Great Firewall of China likewise grows higher, drastically restricting the free flow of information to the Chinese people. By 2020, China's rulers aim to implement an Orwellian system premised on controlling virtually every facet of human life. And when it comes to religious freedom, a new wave of persecution is crashing down on Chinese Christians, Buddhists, and Muslims. Also cracking down on Buddhism. Over the past decade, more than 150 Tibetan Buddhist monks have lit themselves on fire to protest China's repression of their beliefs and their culture. And in Xinjiang, the Communist Party has imprisoned as many as 1 million Muslim Uyghurs in government camps, where they endure round-the-clock brainwashing. Survivors of the camps have described their experience as a deliberate attempt by Beijing to strangle Uyghur culture and stamp out the Muslim faith. It uses so-called debt diplomacy to expand its influence. Today, that country is offering hundreds of billions of dollars in infrastructure loans to governments from Asia to Africa, to Europe, and even Latin America. Yet the terms of those loans are opaque at best, and the benefits invariably flow overwhelmingly to Beijing. Just ask Sri Lanka, which took on a massive debt to let Chinese state companies build a port of questionable commercial value. 2 years ago, that country could no longer afford its payments, so Beijing pressured Sri Lanka to deliver the new port directly into Chinese hands. It may soon become a forward military base for China's growing Blue Water Navy. Since last year alone, Chinese Communist Party has convinced 3 Latin American nations to sever ties with Taipei and recognize Beijing. These actions threaten the stability of the Taiwan Strait, and the United States of America condemns these actions. While our administration will continue to respect our One China policy, as reflected in the 3 joint communiques and the Taiwan Relations Act, America will always believe that Taiwan's embrace of democracy shows a better path for all the Chinese people. Under President Trump's leadership, the United States of America has been defending our interests with renewed American strength. We've been making the strongest military in the history of the world stronger still. Earlier this year, President Trump signed into law the largest increase in our national defense since the days of Ronald Reagan. $716 billion to extend the strength of the American military to every domain. And to interfere in the politics of the United States. The Chinese Communist Party is rewarding or coercing American businesses, movie studios, universities, think tanks, scholars, journalists, and local, state, and federal officials. And worst of all, China has initiated an unprecedented effort to influence American public opinion, the 2018 elections, and the environment leading into the 2020 presidential elections. Chinese authorities have also threatened U.S. companies that depict Taiwan as a distinct geographic entity, or that stray from Chinese policy on Tibet. Beijing compelled Delta Airlines to publicly apologize for not calling Taiwan a province of China on its website. And it pressured Marriott to fire a U.S. employee who merely liked a tweet about Tibet. And Beijing routinely demands that Hollywood portray China in a strictly positive light. It punishes studios and producers that don't. Beijing censors are quick to edit or outlaw movies that criticize China, even in minor ways. For the movie World War Z, they had to cut the script's mention of a virus because it originated in China. The movie Red Dawn was digitally edited to make the villains North Korean, not Chinese. But beyond business and entertainment, the Chinese Communist Party is also spending billions of dollars on propaganda outlets in the United States, and frankly around the world. The Communist Party has also threatened and detained the Chinese family members of American journalists who pry too deep. And it's blocked the websites of U.S. media organizations and made it harder for our journalists to get visas. This happened after the New York Times published investigative reports about the wealth of some of China's leaders. But the media isn't the only place where the Chinese Communist Party seeks to foster a culture of censorship. The same is true across academia. I mean, look no further than the Chinese Students and Scholars Association, of which there are more than 150 branches across America's campuses. These groups help organize social events for some of the more than 430,000 Chinese nationals studying in the United States. They also alert Chinese consulates and embassies when Chinese students and American schools stray from the Communist Party line. China exerts academic pressure in other ways as well. Beijing provides generous funding to universities, think tanks, and scholars, with the understanding that they will avoid ideas that the Communist Party finds dangerous or offensive. China experts in particular know that their visas will be delayed or denied if their research contradicts Beijing's talking points. And even scholars and groups who avoid Chinese funding are targeted by that country, as the Hudson Institute found out firsthand. But our message to China's rulers is this: this president will not back down. The American people will not be swayed, and we will continue to stand strong for our security and our economy. It's also great to see more journalists reporting the truth without fear or favor, digging deep to find where China is interfering in our society and why. And we hope that American and global news organizations will continue to join this effort on an increasing basis. More scholars are also speaking out forcefully and defending academic freedom, and more universities and think tanks are mustering the courage to turn away Beijing's easy money, recognizing that every dollar comes with a corresponding demand. And under President Trump's leadership, I can assure you, America will stay the course. China should know that the American people and their elected officials in both parties are resolved. We will not relent until our relationship with China is grounded in fairness, reciprocity, and respect for our sovereignty. Thank you. God bless you. And God bless the United States.